Hello, it's Kristen and welcome back to my channel. It's been a long time, but we have stuff to do, so let's just dive right into it. In a large bowl, smush around the butter a bit, just to kind of break it up. You want room temperature butter that's nice and soft and malleable, but not very melty. Then add the dark brown sugar and the granulated sugar. Decide not to put the molasses in just yet, and then mix the sugar and the butter together until it's mostly combined. Now add the molasses. A top tip would have been to oil that little bowl with the molasses in it so that all of it could come out very easily, but I forgot to do that, so just scrape off whatever you can. Then mix everything until it's nice and smooth and looks kind of like peanut butter. Don't worry, we didn't forget about the oil. We'll be using that later. In an inconveniently small bowl, whisk the flour, spices, and salt. Then, add the dry ingredients to the wet ingredients. If you're curious, all of the ingredients and measurements will be in the description box below. You want to make the dough into a Play-Doh-like consistency. And if it's too crumbly, you can add the oil 1 tablespoon at a time. I thought this consistency was okay, so I tried using my hands to smush it together into a ball. As it turns out, it was still too dry and kept crumbling apart too easily. This dough would not have been easy to roll out. I broke it up and added another half tablespoon of oil. You're probably like, why oil, Kristen? Why not water? Well, you can for sure try water instead. I just found that water makes the dough kind of sticky and a little bit yucky, whereas oil keeps everything together without getting too pasty. The extra oil brought the dough to a nice consistency that was moldable and not crumbly. Be careful not to add too much oil or else it'll get too greasy. The dough won't be sticky at this point, and it should feel a lot like Play-Doh. The best part about this recipe is that you never have to refrigerate it. But that's only because we're not punching out the shapes before baking. We're actually just going to roll it into a long slab and then bake it that way. Next, take half the dough and press it down with a rolling pin, in between 2 pieces of parchment. Rolling it fresh out the ball tends to make the dough crack, so pressing it evenly first kind of pushes it into the right direction, and then you can start rolling it. I also rolled the dough between 2 pieces of parchment to avoid adding more flour. When it's nice and pressed, you can start and roll the dough to fit your templates. Mine ended up being about 1/4 inch thick and about 18 inches by 12 inches, but yours could be totally different depending on your design. If you want a nice even surface, you can lightly slide the rolling pin over the dough. And again, no need to refrigerate, just put this slab straight in the oven for 12 to 14 minutes or until the edges are crisp and inner part is slightly firm to the touch. Let it cool just a bit before using the templates to cut out the shapes. I like doing it this way better than punching out the shapes then baking because this method gets crisper edges, which is great for standing structures. Just be careful because the cookie in the tray will still be hot, and I highly recommend transferring everything to a cutting board instead of cutting on the cookie sheet like I did. Also be very careful with the pizza cutter. It is kind of slippery and wobbly, so just make sure you're being extra careful when cutting off the cookie bits. You can also use a small knife to cut the hard bits when the cookie starts to cool. So you want to work rather quickly while the cookie is still warm, but you also want to be careful because the tray might be hot. So this part takes a long time, so let's just cut ahead to the other parts.
20 minutes later.
Something also you want to be careful of is handling a warm cookie because it is still soft and really flexible, so it's easy to break around the thin parts. And that's it for part 2. Stay tuned for part 3 of this gingerbread house making adventure. If you're curious about how I designed this structure, check out part 1. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next one.